What's your let's get the frick out of here story? Possibly NSW replies. My friend and I were on our way to a different town for some drinks with a friend of ours. It's a drive, probably like 45 minutes. Anyway, we were passing a joint back and forth by the time we hit the city limits and pulled up next to this guy driving an old RWD V8. You know the one I'm talking about. Brown, rust spots, big engine that's not quite in tune, but when you put it down the tires on the thing will still scream. It's about 11 p and we're parked at a four-way with woods behind us and the town is in front of us with two streets sitting perpendicular to us. Anyway, he looks over at us and revs the engine. I'm driving a Jeep, so I tap the gas and jokingly nod over at him like we're going to do this thing. Stoplight turns green and he hits it hard. I stay parked just watching him with my mouth open and the number still in my hand. Dude starts fishtailing all over the road, goes really far right, over Corex left past the double yellow line, almost hits another car, which swerves out of his way, over Corex back over the double yellow line, hard, jumps the curb on the right side of the street and plows directly into a storefront's giant plate glass window. Glass just showered all over that car. Dude throws the car in reverse, spraying landscape bushes all over inside of the building he just inadvertently entered, backs into a street sign, then burns out down the road. The car that had swerved to avoid him whips a UI and chases after him as well. By then the light had turned red and I turned to my friend and honestly asked him if I had hallucinated the entire thing. He said no, that definitely happened. When we left our buddies at about 3 there were cops everywhere, taping off the building and digging around in the bushes. I thought about stopping and telling them I saw what happened but decided it wasn't worth possibly getting arrested. Took me a full minute to get through paragraph 3 and 4, taking breaks to laugh my butt off. A young 16-year-old me, invited to a house party in a nearby town. A nice place, but the party was populated by a bit more of an alternative crowd than the younger me had grown up with. There was a band playing terrible music in the living room, kids hitting up the pipes in the host's mother's bedroom, nowhere near enough room for all the folk that had decided it was the place to be that Friday evening. Eventually it all spilled out into the streets. A friend who had accompanied me that night is spotted being led by one of the local emo-looking girls out onto the field across from the house. He was a perennial geek amongst geeks, this guy. This was not his style, but he liked her so we left him to it. We all knew he was about to get lucky, and we were happy for him, albeit in a field in the northwest of England. Ah, what a place to lose it. Bless I am. After the fact, we all meet up again upstairs passing around a joint and high-fiving. The next thing we know, music is off, folk are shouting, and footsteps are getting closer. Lots of them. It turned out the girl was supposed to be the lead singer of the band, who in turn happened to be the host, and one of her friends had decided she was being a little bit Door swings open, joint drops to the deck. We all turn in shock as a long-haired greasy black metal fan attempts to decimate each of us with his Ibanez. We pushed him to the ground, barged my way down the stairs and out of the front door. Having thought we were clear of danger now, we call a taxi to pick us up. Having been quiet for around 5 minutes we decided all is cool. Close call. In actual fact, the offended vocalist had spent his 5 minutes getting troops hunting pack together in a fashion I find reminiscent of Age of Empires army building. They spotted us walking down the road and decided to make chase. We spotted our taxi and decided to make haste. We made it just in time, safe in the taxi with the locks on door. The taxi driver saw my lips move but couldn't make out what I was saying over all the banging on the windows. He eventually clicked on. In that moment I was Jack F-ing Bauer screaming, "Get us the frick out of here." The town in question was a rather unheard of place called Colne, East Lancashire. You were a real bro to that guy, man. A lot of my friends would have just left me to be decimated, especially at 16 and stoned. Good guy, you. When I was 19 me and a couple friends decided to go to this bar that opened up not too far away. It was the kind of place that didn't card and we wanted a few drinks. We get there and one of the guys I was with was carrying a pocket knife. The bouncer told him he couldn't take it and so he left it with the girl at the front. Well, after an hour or so we start to realize just how shady this place is, so we decide to leave. As we are walking out the guy realizes he needs to get his knife back, so he goes back inside. My other friend and I are sitting just outside the door waiting when we hear an argument break out about 20 feet away. After some shouting back and forth in Spanish between the parties, we hear gunshots. At that point we both roadie run to my truck and duck behind the tire's engine. A few seconds later the other guy we were with shows up and we get the heck out. A few months later the whole place was shut down due to a police investigation involving gangs and people being chopped up in the basement. TLDR. Went to bar. Shots fired. Peace the frick out. The last sentence tripled the WTF factor. It was 1981 to 1982, a cold night, and me and some punk friends went down to an abandoned movie theater in town. It wasn't a big Bijou style place, more like an old metal roofed building with a brick front. There was band playing there, illegally, because the movie theater still had power hookups. There were two main sections. The former theater lobby where everyone hung out and did drugs, and the actual theater part itself, where the band was playing. I never got to the theater part. I mean, I saw it when the double doors would open, where a band was playing and we had a mosh pit going. But I hung out with some friends near what used to be the concession stand. At some point, a common friend came to us, her head gashed and bleeding. "Some sucker is slam dancing with a knife," she said. At some point the band stopped playing and pointed out the jackass cutting people, and the crowd descended on this guy and beat the crap out of him in the alley. We had a friend named Kathy who was kind of quiet but always hung out with us. Kathy had a very unique skill. She had a sixth sense to when a party was about to go really bad. She would get this far away look on her face, then snap back to reality and announce it was time to go. And we did. You listened to whatever Kathy's voices told her. And that night, in the middle of a conversation, she got that look, and we went, "Ayo, cops are coming," she said. Every one of us in our group was under 17. I was 13. Everything was stupid illegal, so we got the heck out of there. We packed into the Oldsmobile station wagon we arrived in, and as we were pulling out onto the main road, a fleet of cop cars turned into the parking lot and blocked anyone from leaving. We missed being blocked in by maybe 10 seconds. No idea what happened to the people we left behind after that. I arrived home like nothing had happened. I'm imagining your friend Kathy being bit by a radioactive spider that partied a ton and had a little mini beer in one hand. Wandering through the rainy streets of Dundee, me and a friend were making our way back home after a local music gig. We started getting abuse from strangers across the road, but we thought nothing of it. It was about 10 minutes later when we were cutting across a park that we seen two of them following us. I said to my friend, "When they get a little closer, turn round and let's crash them." At this point I noticed a swarm of teenagers flanking us with rocks, poles, bottles and belts in hand. We looked at each other, nodded and just freaking ran for the hills. My luck was out as my friend was a lot faster than me and the crowd came roaring after me. I evaded them by throwing myself into a garden and I peeked from the bushes as they all tore past. TLDR. Got followed by two guys. Decided to fight them but stopped short as we noticed a large group of their armed friends flanking us. Decided silently together to leg it instead. The other day my friend and I were skating a bank at 2 AM because we were both depressed and wanted to ease our minds. We start looking around the bank out of boredom and notice a metal ladder on the backside. So we climb it and gain access to the very plain and boring roof. We were walking around looking to see if we could skate the gap between buildings when I noticed a cop car across the street. As soon as I looked at the car, I noticed the cop had just shut the door, picked up his radio in a panic, and was staring at us. I look at my friend, both of us are dressed in black shirts, jeans, and tell him, "Oh crap, the cops saw us. We have GTFO now." My friend, being a little slow to react, asked, "What's the big deal, dumbass? We're dressed in all black hanging out on top of a bank roof at 2 AM. They think we're robbing the place." Him and I hit the floor, prone crawl to the ladder. I rip my shirt on a metal snag on the way down, and we run to the car like we're on fire. As soon as we're a block away, we hear like 20,000 police sirens go off behind us in the direction of the bank. My friend and I just maintained a poker face on the drive home. It was maybe 1.52 years ago. A friend of mine who is a former cop, let go for stealing out of the evidence locker, was back in town for a bit to see friends. This guy knows everyone. He had a hotel room given to him no charge by a friend who's the AM at the hotel because it wasn't being used for the weekend. We went out to go dong around and find something to do. In the process of the night we end up meeting with this girl we sort of knew who's a stripper, who ends up tagging along. A homeless guy. These two lesbian chicks. One was gorgeous. The other, no so much. We're eventually at the pool at his hotel. We get kicked out of the pool for being too loud, and the girls were topless. We weren't complaining obviously, so we head back up to the room. The ugly one of the two lesbians strips naked, goes on the balcony and positions herself in such a way to where she pisses on the people down below who she decided must have been the ones who were bitching. Cops get called, and my friend's phone rings. It's a friend of his who still works for the police department warning him that they're coming to the hotel. And he figures if you have anything to do with it, I'm giving you a heads up. Everyone goes into panic mode. My friend opens up the bathroom door and there's all sorts of drug paraphernalia. My express was what the serious frick. So the girl, all three of them without hesitation start shoving little bags of drugs and assorted paraphernalia in their snatches. That's when I looked at my friend and said it's time we get the frick out of here. He agreed. We left, and the cops arrested the three girls. As we watched them taking the girls away, a pillow of white power shot out from the under the stripper's skirt. This my friends will be a day I never forget. TL. DR. Hang out with ex-cop friend. Cops show up to hotel. Three girls hide drugs in coaches. We peace out. Cops arrest girls. Cloud of coke shoots out of one of their orifices on the way out. Pillow of white power shot out from under the stripper's skirt. That is one sectarian snatch. This happened to my aunt back in the 90s. She goes to a dance at a Mexican nightclub with a really close friend and they meet a cute nice guy who buys them drinks and such. He offers to drive them home and they accept. They tell the guy their address and after a few minutes they realize the guy is not going the right way, and my aunt, sitting in the passenger seat, calls him out and asks him where they are really going. At this point it gets terrifying as he tells them he is taking them to a vacant lot, where he will violate them and mutilate their breasts and kill them. My aunt says at this point she realized she was too young to die, 17, and that she was not going to let it happen. So she opens the car door while the perp is driving and attempts to jump out. The guy grabs her shirt and starts pulling her back in. So somehow she manages to loosen his grip and jump off. She rolls on the street and the guy shuts the car door after slowing down and speeds off. After he probably realized it would be better to get away with one girl instead of two. My aunt runs as fast as she can to the Closserby houses and starts knocking at all the doors. At 2-3ish in the morning, nobody answers until an old lady opened the door and offered my aunt shelter. My aunt calls the Mexican police and they tell her they can't do anything about it until family reports the other girl missing. The next week the girl was found dead at a vacant lot. That story taught me to stay the heck away from strangers and never leave with a stranger from a party, especially at another country. That is because the cops are all too busy winning the war on drugs. Once I was holding about 3 ounces of weed for the drummer in my band. It sat in my glove compartment all day while I was at work, waiting for its papa to come and sell it. Well, after a long day I walk out to my car and just as I was trying to find my keys about 6 cop cars surround me and start screaming for me to get on the ground and to not move. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. I think for sure someone gave me up, or framed me. All sorts of scenes are running through my head as the cops cuff me, sit me on the curb and start looking through my car. Suddenly one of the officers pops his head up and says, "This isn't the kid we're looking for," pulls up huge bag of weed, she's just trying to sell some drugs. They all laugh and drive away. Apparently a gas station had been robbed not 3 blocks away, and the getaway driver used a vehicle similar to mine. I drove home at breakneck speeds. Best part? Cops let me keep the weed. Equals D. 6 years ago, was at a house party with a bunch of friends. The house was a friend's brother's place who had a roommate that was a neo-Nazi. My friend Shelby hereon referred to as Jack. So neo-Nazi invites his skinhead friends over, and my friend has all his friends over. Party ended up being a mix of skinheads, Mexicans, Native Americans and a few black kids. Too many people show up to the party. Had at least 100 people. Jack's brother and his roommate start to kick people out that they didn't know. Nazi recruits his close friends to help. They started booting all the non-whites because they are skinhead buttholes. Total of 5-7 skinheads had showed up in a group. This one black kid who had known Jack and his brother for a decade ended up getting bounced out the door by the skinheads. An black kid didn't press the issue and got in his car to take off. One of the Nazis leaned into his window and started shouting, screaming in his face and trying to pull him out of the car. Annan pulled out his pistol and shot the skinhead a couple times and tore out. I grabbed my friends and we're in the living room making sure we have everyone. We're standing in the empty living room. I'm holding my girlfriend cause she was PTFO. Short Nazi comes tearing in the back door. Front locked after shooting. And screaming, "Shoot me again, mother sucker. Shoot me again," yelling racial slurs. Saw my girlfriend, who was black, and started grabbing at her. I headbutt him, my friends push him away and he runs out the back and jumps the stone wall fence to the left. Left backyard had 2 boxers and a Doberman. They attacked him. All I heard was "oh crap" my leg and screaming and barking. We jumped over the back wall. I fell into a koi pond and later found a goldfish in my underwear. Neo-Nazi died later that night in the hospital. About 7 years ago I went on a high school trip to NYC. We had an afternoon to explore Soho, and a directive to rendezvous at some landmark at the end of the day. Not being into shopping, especially for overpriced knockoffs, my friends and I went exploring the Lower East Side. We were in search of an underground record shop. None of us had any clue where one might be, but we were sure that the seedier the street, the more likely it would have an independent record dealer. After walking by some incredibly nasty Asian vendors, selling everything from pig feet to fish guts, we saw what we had been looking for. It was perfect. Large black sign saying Pirate Records with a skull and crossbones. Boarded up windows. Covered in posters and graffiti. Now we weren't sure it was still an open business, and we were pretty sketched out after seeing pimps, people get mugged, and toothless old ladies peddling pee from garbage bags. So, we elected two amongst us to approach the door. They go up, open the door, peek inside, then immediately turn around and run as fast as they could back towards us, motioning with their hands that we should all get the frick out of there. After a few blocks of flat out booking it, we get to ask them what exactly they saw. Dude, it was at least 100 gangster looking Asians. Gambling. They all turned and looked right at us when we opened the door. When I was a senior in high school, these two kids had been talking crap to each other for weeks. Word got around at school that they were finally going to meet up to fight in a grocery store parking lot 5 minutes away immediately after school. So my friend and I get out of class and drive over to the parking lot where there's already a pretty big crowd assembled and one of the guys that was going to fight. We were all standing around waiting for the other guy to show up, and people kept saying things like, "Man, I hope that Mikey doesn't show up," and every time Mikey shows up, somebody gets shot. I had no idea who this Mikey guy was. It was my first year at the school, but the rumor was that this guy had shot 2 people the previous year. So I'm standing there, taking bets on who's going to win the fight, and this short guy comes up to me and says, "How much money you got?" I thought he was asking about making a bet for the fight. So I say, "That depends on who you're taking in the fight." He didn't like that. So he pulls out a gun and puts the barrel up to my throat and says, "How about now that I got this .38 to your chin? I'll just see for myself how much you got." I just kind of pause out of disbelief and stutter out that I actually didn't have any money on me. A lie. And he says, "We'll see. Don't go nowhere. I'll be right back," and walks off to his car. I grab my friend and tell him we've got to get the frick out of here, and we go to my car and pull off. I met Mikey, and Mikey didn't like me. Turns out, the other guy never even showed up to fight. His mom found out about it and took him out of school. TLDR. Got a gun put to my throat waiting for a fight that never happened. Got the frick out. I'm still waiting on my money. B. Spent a semester living in Madrid last year. After a late night out, 2 of my roommates are walking home and we are approached by a man about 2 blocks away from our apartment. The guy is pestering us to come to his strip club. Free entry and all, blah blah blah. I'm exhausted and trying to go to sleep, but one of my roommates thinks we should go in. He tells me our third roommate, OSAP, would clearly react in a priceless way, and I'm convinced. I say I will stay for a couple of minutes. At least there was free entry, right? So we get to the place, which is right around the corner from our apartment, but underground, and we had never noticed it before. There are a few sketchy characters sitting outside the door, but this was not unusual for our neighborhood, and we were going to an underground strip club. We walk in and head down a long hallway. I turn a corner, and instead of seeing a stage with scantily clad women as I expected, there was just a bar. Sitting at the bar were 6'8" thick women wearing dresses just below the butt. We soon realize this is no strip club but a brothel. Who would have though? Well, that was a kind of awkward discovery, but mostly funny. At this point, the three of us are kind of standing in a mostly empty room just staring at the girls and two other dudes in there. One of these guys comes up to us, clearly very inebriated. For some odd reason, he is telling us he wants to buy us drinks. We respectfully decline, but now he insists to come into a room with him and his companion. At this point, my SAP roommate tries to slink out and makes a slow break for the door. The bouncer tells him he can't leave and brings him back into where we are. At this point, we are beginning to get kind of freaked. This baracho with no teeth and the female start herding us forcibly into a room with only a bed. We knew it was time to go when they started to bring chairs for us to sit in and watch whatever was about to happen. The three of us then bolted for the door, actually running, for fear they wouldn't let us leave. The bouncer was not expecting us, and we were able to make a clean getaway. Overall, it ended up being very innocent, but we weren't sure if we were going to be robbed, forced to pay for OH, or forced to watch a toothless man frick for money. TLDR. Temporarily forcibly detained in a underground brothel where man tries to get me to watch him defile a prostitute. I was coming back from the Atlanta airport on MARTA, our sorry excuse for mass transit, after a class trip to NYC. The first stop after the airport, some interesting characters came on the train. An obvious pimp holding a strung out H on lockdown. Killer, a fella who was 6'5", 300 pounds and was 80% covered with gang tattoos. Killer bumps into my friend and apologizes in the most soft-spoken voice I have ever heard, only reinforcing his killer name as they are always the psycho ones in movies. The pimp gives the H a crack pipe and she smokes it right there on the train. Then Killer receives a phone call. The ringtone was like a Rolling Stone, I crap you not. Listens to the other person on the line and says smoke that N and hangs up. They get off after a little bit, and then this really shifty guy gets on and sits next to one of my teachers, a really funny older lady. She's sitting back to back with another person. The sketch guy leans over her and asks the guy behind her how much you got a pound. Then they exchange backpacks and get off the train. Then, one stop before ours, the doors open to the train and a teenage black guy falls into the train bleeding, saying he was stabbed. We hit the emergency stop and call the police. We ended having to stay there till 1 AM answering questions about what we saw. I just wanted to get out of there so bad. For your information, the guy was still conscious when the paramedics left with him. No idea if he made it or not. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.